we go. When you need to amplify, share your stories on the fly. Call Past the Scope, EDU will bring it to you. Your event, we got you. Conference tips, we got you. Stories told, we got you. Around the globe, we got you, cause we're Past the Scope, ayy. Past the Scope, ayy. Past the Scope, ayy. Past the Scope, EDU. Past the Scope, ayy. Past the Scope, ayy. Past the Scope, EDU, coming to you live. Yeah, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Past the Scope EDU in partnership with the Leading Equity Center, bringing you the Art of Advocacy, Advocacy conference, 3-day conference that's going on. And this, yes sir, yes ma'am, is the lead up party to the 3-day event. Welcome. I've got Sheldon Eakins with me, and of course, my partner in crime, Valerie Lewis. What's up, y'all?
What's up?
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those that are joining us, yes, this is, not our typical show. However, as you know, here at Past the Scope EDU, we do whatever we can to amplify the voices and make sure that we show out on the stories that need to be heard. And this conference, ladies and gentlemen, if you base anything off of last year, is going to be fire. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about it. I'm going to let Sheldon, do the speaking. But Sheldon is the founder, CEO, man in charge, king on the hill of the Lead Equity Center. And this is his second year putting on this conference. Sheldon, tell the folks what's up.
Yo, first of all, Brian, I love the way that song right there was jamming. Like, I almost want to tell you, let's play it again.
You gotta run it back.
Run it back, remix and all that. You gotta let me jump on that next time, man. Okay,
dude, I just put that together in an hour. Let's roll.
Yeah,
we can do it.
Look, because Sheldon comes from a whole line, you may not know this, but we have that connection with singers at Pine Forge Academy and Oakwood University. Yes. So he comes from that lineage of singers and great music. So definitely.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do something.
Yeah, we've had our chat around it. So, let's just make that happen for real.
Okay.
But anyway, tell the folks about what's going on.
Yeah, I digress. So basically, tomorrow starts our Leading Equity Virtual Summit, the Art of Advocacy. It's a 3-day event. First day is going to be the power of preparation. Whenever I do the episodes and I get folks that will reach out via email, they're always like, I don't know how to, I'm doing this work and I want to help people understand the importance of equity and I don't know where to start. So I always say, well, you need to prepare, right? You don't want to just go in there guns blazing, you're not ready, right? So day 1 is power of preparation. Then we move into day 2, which is power of persuasion. And then finally, we wrap day 3 up with the power of persistence. Sometimes it takes multiple touches in order for things to change. And we wrap things up with the last day that way. And we have well over 70, I want to say it's almost 80 sessions that we have lined up. Day 1 alone is like 30. And it's just hits you hard after hard. It's crazy the amount of sessions that are there, the folks that have submitted videos. they're awesome. And so I'm really looking forward to that opportunity to be able to share with people. And it's a free event starting tomorrow.
What'd you say? Free?
Free
99?
Free 99.
We love that.
Free 99.
I guess, you mentioned for those who are watching it on different channels, they may not be familiar with the Leading Equity Center as it is anyway. You want to drop some knowledge on that for them as well?
Yeah. So, the Leading Equity Center was formed from the podcast. So the Leading Equity podcast was what started. And eventually we just kind of branched into the Leading Equity Center, which is just all about, providing the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. And so we do a lot of racial equity work, trainings, webinars. We have online courses available. We have a lot of free resources. We have some stuff that, you might have to spend a couple dollars, but again, you're investing in your professional development. But overall, we're here to support those educators who are aware of the issues that are happening within our schools, social justice or equity issues, all those things, and we're there to support.
Gotcha. Just going to show it real quick, ladies and gentlemen. You can actually find that information at the leadingequitycenter.com, and you scroll down to the Art of Advocacy Virtual Summit, and you'll be able to get that information on that free 3-day summit, packed with 80 plus speakers that are going to bring nothing but the fire as we go along. So I'll leave the perusing up to you. We're just going to go ahead and get on with this because we brought on some folks with us that are from the conference. Speakers from, is this day one?
Well, these are some folks that I think we have one that is on the conference. The rest of them are just my friends. I just say, hey, can y'all just join me on Sunday? Either we weren't able to get them part of the event, or just folks that I keep in touch with. So just wanted to bring on a few of my friends for tonight.
Cool beans. And we've got some folks joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're no matter what channel you're joining us, we do welcome interaction. So your comments, your questions, all of those are welcome no matter where you're watching it from. We thank you for watching, Emma. And we'll throw those comments up on the screen as we can get this conversation going. So let's just get the party started. Watch this, y'all. Bam. And bam. And bam. And bam.
Love how that works out.
And bam.
Nice.
Oh, man.
What's up, y'all?
Hey, friends.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
I got a feeling we're gonna be nice friends after all of this.
Absolutely.
Hey, people.
So why don't let's go ahead and go around the Brady Bunch square here and have folks introduce themselves. I hope it's the way that it is on my screen, but let's go ahead and start off below me. That's Mona.
Hi, I'm Mona Lathy, and I'm the founder and a school equity strategist with Renewed Harmony. Happy to be here. Sheldon, thanks for inviting me.
All right, you get to shout out the next person.
All right, Ken, it's you.
I feel like we should do the whole looking up, looking sideways kind of thing and waving,
God, is that you?
The virtual in the same room kind of thing, right? Nah, it's good to be here. I love looking at this beautiful panel, and obviously it's a privilege to be a part of it. So for those that don't know me, I'm Ken Shelton. I'm a Los Angeles-based educator, also a speaker, consultant, anti-bias, anti-racist educator, and technology passionate educator. Yeah. I was going to say extraordinaire, but then again, that means that there's no room for growth. So humility. So if we're kind of going around, then I'm gonna pass it over to.
But hold up. I
know my bad.
I know it's Sunday, but you got your heavenly gain and compression on your mic. So
still,
yes, sir.
How about now?
Yes, it's still there. How about go ahead and pass it on, and then we'll work on that on the side.
I turned it all the way down.
Who we passing it to?
That's just natural bass. That's what that is.
Yeah, that's just my voice, Brian. You know this. Look,
I'm extraordinaire. He's heavenly, Brian.
I'm arm's length from the microphone too.
He is beyond. He is beyond Earth.
Okay, so if we're going, I'll pass it to Mr. Waldron.
Thank you so much, Ken. It's my pleasure to be here. Grand Rising, brothers and sisters. I'm Sheldon, based here in Washington, D.C., the site of the folks who just survived the most recent siege in our government. I'm a passionate educator. I'm passionate about diversity in schools. I've trained a number of teachers of color, particularly male teachers of color, to take up positions in our school systems right here in D.C. I'm the proud founder of Mentor Post. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Dr. Eakins. And I will pass, I think, up to Dr. Crosby.
Hi, I'm Cherie Crosby. I'm a professor and dean in the Philadelphia area, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm passionate about working with students and ensuring that they are successful and and ensuring that we do have equity in the work that we do. And I'm going to pass it to Vicky. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I got it. So my name is Vicky Mascareño Nelson, but my Latinx friends call me Vicky, as you know. Vicky. That feels good to me. So I think this group, you can call me Vicky if you want to. I'm a school counselor in Vermont. I've been a school counselor for 20 years, but I grew up in Cleveland, just saying, for people, all my Cleveland people out there. And so I'm a school counselor, but I'm also a lead equity leader. I'm with my partner, Yasmin, who's right above me here. So my fuego burns bright to support kids from a mental health standpoint, from an aspect of how I grew up, from, supporting historically excluded populations. And so my fuego burns so bright that I need someone to partner with to help me counterbalance sometimes. And that is Yaz. So I'm going to pass it right up to Yaz.
Hi, folks. My name is Yasamine Gordon. I'm over here in Shelburne, Vermont as well. I am the other DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion coach for I think we're the largest school district in the state here in Shelburne, Vermont. We're just south of Burlington. I grew up here. I wasn't born here. I was born in Florida, but I grew up in Vermont. So very unique experience growing up here in a predominantly white northeastern area and state. And Vicky and I have been doing this work for years, unofficially, officially, in many different capacities, in our motherhood, in our sisterhood, and everything else. So I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you so much, Sheldon, for having us.
Nice.
My pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining us. Brian, is it all right if I throw a question out there?
Yes, sir. Your show, your thing.
I mean, I don't know. It's your show. I mean, you was on the anyway. I don't want to be disrespectful. So I Sheldon mentioned something earlier about what happened this week, and I want to throw this out to the group here and see who kind of wants to jump on first. But with everything that happened last week, starting Wednesday, if you will, why is it so important for us to prepare our students for what's to come, I guess, because we're transitioning into a new presidency at some point. And why is it so important that we need to prepare for our students to see what's happening and kind of open their eyes up? I see Cherie
I just think that, unfortunately, this is going to be one of the most rocky transitions I know in my lifetime. And it's not going to be easy. I know the day after Wednesday, I took my blood pressure and it was sky high. And I was just, I'm side-eyeing people like, are you a white supremacist? And I feel like depending on our, where we live and who the students have access to will determine how they're going to process this information. And they may not be in households or schools where they can openly discuss this and how they're feeling and what to do next. And I do feel, and I'll end on that because I can talk forever, that we do have to be realistic with them because, I'm fully expecting more violence just because what we saw on Wednesday is not over. It's clear that group of people are hell-bent on doing whatever they can to disrupt our democracy.
Absolutely. Well, when you have folks talking about they want heads on pikes and heaving and hoeing, I mean, they were big angry on Wednesday and did not get to accomplish half of what I think they wanted to. So we definitely know this isn't over.
Yeah.
The thing to add, which I'm sure you all will agree, one, I'm sick and tired of people saying this is not who we are, this is not us. Okay, so this is why history is so critical, and it even goes to the point of the question. I have and in fact, I was talking with Brian and Dee about it. I have an EJI calendar. I've gotten the calendar from the Equal Justice Initiative last several years, and on that calendar it has some incident or some significant Black history occurrence of every single day. So it's not all death and destruction, but the whole point is it has those things. And I had the privilege of being on a panel with Erica Buddington last month, and she did a thread on Twitter where she worked her way through all these different riots and massacres. And it's like, not only is it who this country has been, it's the way this country has been built. And the thing that people don't realize is two parts to this question is, one, in order to heal, you must first recognize and reconcile. And the longer that you continue to hide things on the margins and do what I call today's version of teaching history is essentially American mythology, because there's no truth and fact and depth to it. So as long as you continue to hide that and celebrate things that are false narratives, it gives people a false impression of who they are and what their country is. Adding to that is it doesn't prepare students for the ability to engage in the meaningful dialogue and the necessary dialogue to understand, why are we separated? What are our differences? Why do those differences matter? Who's had to struggle more than others, which goes against the myth of meritocracy.
Right.
And then even continuing on, if you think in terms of adults, it's hard enough for us to process things like this. Now put that burden on a 13 or a 14-year-old, and especially on a student of color, where I got to process it. And then if I'm in a diverse classroom, everyone's going to be looking at me like I have all the answers. And then maybe my teacher won't even address it, because I saw on social media where a lot of teachers are like, yeah, we're not going to talk about it in class. It's like, why? Let me get it. I know why. We won't get political.
I want to speak to that point, your last point, Ken, about us not getting political, because I think in our country right now, there's been the weaponizing of identity politics. So it's entrenched, right? So I have this definition here of identity politics, which is a tendency for people of a particular religion, race, social background to form exclusive political alliances, moving away from traditional broad-based party politics. So then we see this like polarization, and it aligns with who I am. It's like entrenched into who I am. And then social media is limiting what I can see. So everybody who I follow believes what I believe. And so it's all reinforced. So we are extremely polarized right now as a nation. And that polarization is entrenched in our identity. And so you talk about these myths, some people don't even know that they believe in a myth of meritocracy, because it's who they are. It's what they believe, and it's so enwrapped in their identity that asking them to look at it from a systemic point of view, from an institutionalized oppression kind of a viewpoint, that's so not, they're not there yet. And then those of us who have been doing this work for 20 plus years and we know it, it's how do we get to them in a way that honors their identity, but pulls them out of, I'm gonna quote Zaretta Hammond, pulls them out of the matrix carefully. Because if we disregard people's social emotional reactions to all that's going on either side, we're robbing them of a piece of their identity, a piece of their humanity. So how do we bring them, that's my question, how do we bring them out of the myth, out of the matrix, and into reality, while still honoring their identity? Because so many of us are triggered. So many of us who do this work are weaponizing shame. And let me tell you, shame doesn't bring people to your side. Shame makes them hold on to their identity further. So we really have to be aware of how we're doing this work through the lens of at our best selves, from our best social emotional place. That's all I wanted to say about that.
I would add that as a person living here in DC and experiencing Wednesday sort of live, Wednesday was really a milestone in a number of previous events, whether it's, getting the Billy Club across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, or getting fisticuffs for wearing suits in California. Black and brown folks have been having a siege on our livelihoods in America for forever. Wednesday was a building up and a culmination of the centering of whiteness in America and a culmination of the centering of racism. I had several students who were actually downtown working on Wednesday and couldn't leave fast enough when the rioting started. And several were actually confronted by these guests to Washington, D.C. And they couldn't leave town fast enough. Many folks were wearing face masks, many folks were actually up in their faces asking who they were with. And that also builds to the inequity that some folks could take off on Wednesday, right? You can stay home, you could shelter at home, you could be safe. But many of our students that we serve are in frontline jobs, in restaurant jobs, in healthcare jobs, and have to go to work and have to confront this racism head on. The way it connects to the equity and diversity is it's all connected. When our students navigate school systems, they're navigating structures that center whiteness as well. They're navigating structures that are molded in implicit bias, that see them as a deficit already, that would have AP classes be filled with their white peers, and teachers not even ask them if they want to be in the classroom. And this is what we witnessed on Wednesday as well. We witness some law enforcement, we witness the majority white folks entering a building that was supposed to be guarded. And they were fighting against the law enforcement while waving a Blue Lives Matter flag. The unmitigated gall of the whole thing is troubling. I started to witness that on Wednesday, living in the city where it happened. And our students are still grappling with the trauma of knowing that their identities, their bodies are seen as a deficit without doing anything. Because it juxtaposes very differently to the summer and spring protests where police actually arrested several thousands in one day, fought several in one day, and we saw a very different response to illegality and the siege on the Capitol.
I just wanted to jump in and talk about, go back to Sheldon's question about, why it is that it's important for us to speak with our students and our children about what is happening on Wednesday. And I agree wholeheartedly with both Ken and what Mona were both saying around, teachers. And one thing that I wanted to say is that for those teachers that are afraid or hesitant or whatever their reasons are for not addressing this, I just want to make it clear that it's our responsibility, because even though we are the adults that are, this is happening among adults right now. This is happening with the people who are in positions of power currently. They're beginning this transition, but they're certainly not going to finish it. This is still going to be going on in the next generation's lifetime and the next generation after that. We've seen that throughout the history of this country. And so if we don't take this opportunity to teach and to show our children the truth and to show them how it connects to the past, then there's no way that change is going to continue to happen. They need to know, they need to see it with their own eyes. So the folks that are holding back are actually doing our children more of a disservice than anything else.
And I was just going to tag along, Yaz and I are in the same district and a mostly white district. And I just want to, when you were talking about the students, I was just reading something online that was talking about, what people have talked about, what are we going to say to our kids or how are we going to process this the next day? But I saw this really great post and I feel bad who I'm not retrieving who it was right now, who really pressed against, you're right, we got to take care of the kids. But as adults, as the grown-ups in these schools, we have to be having these hard conversations with each other. Because as you all know, and people that work in the systems, what we find, Yaz and I see a lot, is our educators don't want to have the conversation with each other. So breaking down the systems to even have the conversations, to know how to have the conversations with students, starts with ourselves. And what she and I find is there is so much dismantling in the philosophies and the ideologies of the people in power, i.e. a lot of educators and administrators, that there's so much power there that I feel like as part of advocacy, what she and I have really pushed in, that's where she and I have gone strong this year, is we want to push against the complicitness. We want to dismantle some of the culture that continues to support and center whiteness in our schools so that we can begin to, talk about history and in a way that's that obviously promotes the understanding for all identities moving forward.
One of the challenges I think we face is that so often the institutions mute the teachers and the administrators. So we hear things, we see posters and people protesting, and they say white silence is violence. And then there's so much anger when a teacher doesn't post something that shows solidarity or support or just denounces this kind of violence. However, in my state, all the way up in the State Department at the beginning of every school year, teachers are told and educators are told what everything they do on social media can be held against them. Mm-hmm. And so that's traumatizing. So then there's this all or nothing thinking about engaging in the discourse. And then there's vitriol about not participating in social media, on social media, denouncing it. But there are so many people who want to and who are screaming because they have to stay silent. Mm-hmm. And that's another example of the system being oppressive. It's mm-hmm. oppressing us by by taking away our voice and telling us, well, be careful, whatever you write, be held against you. You could be fired for it. So people are it's about self-preservation oftentimes.
You're so right, Mona. I think during these times, particularly, with COVID and just how everyone's been feeling, I've been seeing teachers voice their opinions on social a little bit more. And, and I can be brave enough to say, in the district that I work for, I'm an administrator in my district, and that's some of the stuff that our teachers, you go through that first week orientation where social media and what you post and what you do can certainly be career ending. And actually based on people speaking out against, making sure that everyone wears their mask, we've had teachers and even administrators called in to the district level to be asked specifically about this post that they put on. And teachers that were held in high esteem in our building that are very vocal, that don't look like me or any of you on screen, have had a difference in their political views that are more aligned with how we think. And those teachers that were up on a pedestal are now cast to the side. And now no one wants to hear from them anymore. And so they're feeling the brunt of it. So you're absolutely right. It's like, why don't they have the right to speak out as a human, first and foremost, before an employee of a district? How they feel and how it affects their families, that should be held in high regard, and they shouldn't be scrutinized or penalized for those opinions.
But, I want to add something to that, because I remember those days, and you all are touching on an even larger thing to be mindful of that we can't solve in this call, is a lack of diversity in the educator workforce in the first place. Okay. So it makes it easy to isolate voices that are against the status quo or that are not just going to be complicit, and then do things that are punitive. And then if you're an educator of color, you stand out even more. I remember that very same scenario happened to me early in my career after I had reached permanent status. So that's a key detail to share. And I literally said, tell me legally how you can hold me accountable for using my social media. That's my phone, my computer, my time. I don't even have my job or my school listed in my profiles anywhere. So how is it if you can, and my whole thing is, where do you draw the line? Because if you can do that for someone on social media, well, what happens if I record another teacher saying something and I put that out and that teacher was saying something? You see, and I know it's different depending upon where you are, but my thing with that, and I don't really know what the solution, actually I do know what one of the solutions is, but I always catch myself, because ultimately, if you think in terms of like collective bargaining and even teachers unions, they're meant to maintain the status quo. They always, I remember you see a lot of, and we all on this call have seen the speakers like, be the voice, be the squeaky wheel, be the squeaky wheel. I think that is a very dangerous advice for that speaker who hasn't ever done what many of us have done, that you put yourself, either your job at risk or your job's, I would say your sanity at risk, because the squeaky wheel doesn't get the grease, the squeaky wheel gets replaced. And so my thing around that is to start asking the questions around, okay, if you can hold me accountable for my social media platform, then tell me, when can I use my voice of what you can't hold me accountable for? As long as, and that's why I always used to say those things, as long as I'm not indicating that I'm representational of the district messaging, I'm not representational of my school, I have nothing in my profile that indicates what school I work at, I have nothing in my profile that indicates what subject matter I teach. So at what point do you draw that line?
Let me jump in real quick, and I do want to introduce Sue. She's just joined in. I want to give her an opportunity. I have a quick comment that I want to make, and then we'll bring it over to Sue. Even with this summit, I've reached out to people to do this live session throughout the week, and I've gotten at least 2 emails from folks that said, you know what, my district saw the social media posts that I'm advertising my session, and they told me already, I've already been reprimanded just for submitting a session to the Leading Equity Summit. They have an issue with, we can't, you're not supposed to be talking about equity in a public, you had to get our permission. And I don't understand, why is it, if I'm doing it on, like Ken said, if I'm doing this on my own time, why do I have to ask permission? I'm not representing my school. I have to ask the district permission whether or not I can do an equity session for a free event like that. And I've gotten at least 2 emails already. Just say, hey, can you jump on with this kickoff? Let's do this live thing. And they're already like, man, I'm already in trouble because I'm just doing this already. And that's the problem. I want to let Sue introduce herself because she's joining us as well. So Sue, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and if you have any comments in regards to the topic, feel free. You're on mute.
Hi, my name is Sue Shepley. Most people call me Coach Sue. I think that's what my social media is under. And Sheldon, I want to tell you, we're getting snow tonight in Houston. So it's like, yes, can you believe that? That's why it took me so long to get home, because no, I don't think anybody can drive in sleet. It's actually sleeting out right now. But I kind of jumped in, and I hope that we're talking about our students' response and the way that we are able to talk about, or if we can talk about, what happened in our capital. And I was so excited when I went into 5th grade PE on Thursday, because my students were like, they started screaming as soon as I walked in the door, and they were like, we've waited all day. We can't wait to talk with you about what happened in the Capitol. Wow. And that just felt so amazing that they had been waiting. And I teach PE, and I teach all the grades in my school. But 7 years ago, when I started at Wharton, I started integrating I started trying to change the climate. And I felt that in order to change the school climate, I needed to change the classroom climate. Mm-hmm. And that began with using a culturally relevant lens to teach them. So every year I try to work to empower them by using their stories, their backgrounds, doing things like we march in 1st grade against unsafe driving, because we study who upstanders are. And my students know in PE, we're upstanders. We stand up for one another. So I teach a very untraditional PE class. But I've heard a lot of teachers say, we're not going to talk about this. We don't want to talk about it. And in PE, I felt that it's important that we do talk about it, I do ask my students, what did you think? And I stopped class in 4th grade PE on Wednesday, and we watched the live TV cast of it, because I was like, this is what PE is about. This is why, PE has a history of exclusion. It has a history of being inequitable. PE has a history of being taught from a white male perspective. And most of the things that we teach come from a Western view anyway. So I think a lot of it has to do with the climate that you start to create in your classroom, and then the culture starts to come about in itself, where we start to value one another. And my fifth graders were so excited because this year we had been talking about the Declaration of Universal Rights, the universal human rights. And one of the activities they had in PE was they were in charge of their own country or their own planet. And so in order to write the laws that they would enact, they had to come up with the values. What did we value in there? If I value that everybody should have an education, then I'm going to have a law that everybody can participate in education. And I know that it's difficult in many classrooms, and teachers, I don't think, know how to, and maybe that's the point, is that maybe some teachers don't know how to have that conversation. How do I talk about something, and how do I give student voice without silencing or oppressing someone else? And I find with a lot of our teachers, they don't know how to balance that they want to be able to talk about it, but they don't know what to do when the students start to argue with one another.
I've seen that happen a lot, where it's like, okay, I want to engage. And I tell teachers, I say, just, you will learn so much when you just listen to what your students have to say, when you just listen to what they have on their mind. Some folks, like teachers, a lot of times teachers feel like they have to always have control of their classroom. And so when there's a discussion happening, they need to be at the forefront and having that, no, just sit back, sit down, put your feet up, let them talk, let them go at it. It's okay. Like, it's, set some ground rules before they get going, and then, allow them the opportunity to express themselves. But sometimes folks will just get too scared and say, well, it's too political, or I don't know enough about it, or I have this stance on it and I don't want to interject. And I just say, just let them go. Just let them talk.
Yeah, that's more the reason to be quiet and listen, being that your number one approach. But I want to address something in that many school districts told their teachers that if you do talk about this, you have to remain objective when it comes to, what took place. Make sure that you're bringing up the facts, but you must remain objective. I see some folks smiling when it comes to stuff like that. What do you think of that particular approach?
I think we're smiling because we've all heard it a million times before, and we all probably heard it on Thursday when we went in on Thursday morning. I know I did,
I mean, in this particular instance, what are you being objective about when someone is engaging in violence? There's no objectivity about that. It's violence. It's violence. Period. Like, you can't say, oh, well, they were nice, violent people. No.
But I know, like here in Texas,
right. This is not the time to really be objective. It's they have in this particular circumstance, they have committed a crime. It's a crime to act that way. Period.
Yeah, that whole both sides, don't pick a side, be objective. Listen, that's gaslighting. Period. The end. The only two sides are what's right and what's wrong. And what we saw, there are laws written that tell you that was wrong. So there is no right or wrong on that. Yes, there's other things. I remember seeing, it was it's a close friend of mine that I follow on social media as well. And I remember she had posted a statement around a difference of opinion or things like your favorite flavor of ice cream, but not when it comes to racism and white supremacy.
Right. Now, and I agree with that. I have to always take a step back because Texas we are a red state, and we have open carry here, which is always difficult for me to go into a grocery store and seeing someone strapped up. And many of my students, even though I'm at an international baccalaureate school, so that's one way that I can easily push my PE curriculum. And it was what happened on Wednesday was a great discussion about the pyramid of hate. And I was able to bring that back down to looking at the pyramid of hate. But at the same time, when I was discussing this at the time with my fourth graders, many of my students, they echo what they hear their parents say about our current administration. And I believe I had several parents who went out to Washington. And so listening to some of the things, and I have other students who are their family's very liberal. And, it was kind of like trying to maneuver the boxers in this match. What point can you say what you want to say to the point where now it's being disrespectful and crossing the lines? And I had to really maneuver with my students to say, yes, I understand I might not agree with your parents' point of view, but I understand where your parents are coming from. Let's take it back to the pyramid of hate. And where did this go wrong? Where did it go wrong under the pyramid of hate? And I started teaching about the pyramid of hate in pre-K. We discussed that, and because we discussed bias-based bullying and use the pyramid of hate to look as we move each year, and we broaden our examination of bias and oppression as we look at it within our communities, and then we go our state, and then we look at within our country, and by fifth grade we're looking at it within our world. But I agree there's definitely right and wrong and when it became to the point of violence. What I was very appreciative is when my fifth graders brought it back home, and all of them said, had those people been of a different color, had that been a Black Lives Matter. And there was not one Black student face to face with me that day in learning. And thank you for showing that. I think that we don't talk about the pyramid of hate enough in education.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Sue. I talked about that. Sheldon and I collaborated on an event for Partners in Equity, and I did a presentation on xenophobia and how it manifests, and what kind of resources we can use in the classroom. And that was one of the resources I shared as well. My background, I'm Arab American, Muslim American. So something I'm very familiar with is when extremists or fanatics misrepresent my identity. So I can think about if there's a continuum of how people practice their religion. The people who commit acts of terror and who identify as Muslim don't represent the kind of Islam that I practice. And so that's, there's varying degrees. And I denounce those people as terrorists. And I don't even believe that they understand the basic tenets of Islam. And I think what's happening right now is that some of our Trump supporters who are not white supremacists fear that they're getting put into a category of a white supremacist because they too support Trump, and the people who did this act of violence at the Capitol had Trump flags everywhere. And so it's a lot of people, I think, are just defending their identity. And I can identify with that. I can identify with having people misrepresent what I believe and go to an extreme. And so I think as advocates for equity, if we can help people understand, we see you and we understand that you are not in the same category as them. Because some of the conflicts that I have seen have been that people assume that if you are someone who's a diversity or equity inclusion trainer or facilitator of this work, you aren't going to respect me for my political identity. And that's how polarized we are as a country. That they can't come to the table because they're afraid that we are going to not honor their, dishonor their identity.
Mona, if I may add, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that conversation has come up, the whole, well, let's just agree to disagree. And I'll share a quote from one of my personal heroes, James Baldwin. We can agree to disagree as long as our disagreement isn't rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea of understanding, and I'm glad you also mentioned, because that does happen. You all notice that the actions of an individual are extrapolated to and applied to an entire group, dependent upon who that individual is.
I also want to bring us back to the original notion of shame as well. And the reason why many school districts asked us to be objective and nonpartisan in the discussions post Wednesday, there is a weaponizing of shame.
Yeah.
And I think in the scenario, as Dr. Cosby mentioned, there are some things that are right and there's some things that are just wrong. And without weaponizing shame, we have to be able to really strongly rebut the weaponizing of shaming that would allow wrong to have centering, to allow racism to be centered. There were just some things about Wednesday that were clear, that folks were waving Confederate and Nazi insignia in the Congress building.
Right.
And passing that between, you don't want to offend someone for their view, or you don't want to shame someone for their perspective. There's just a line of right and wrong there. I think this is where sometimes, the politically correct class, to educate, we have to really be very clear. Some things are right and some things are definitely
right. And yeah, in this circumstance, you're looking at the behavior, like it's the behavior and the actual actions of whoever was committing that. So, and you're not saying Trump is, I mean, you're not calling names, but you're looking at the behavior. Like when I saw the noose on the, I'm thinking like, that's the dream I used to have as a kid, that, someone was going to hang me. It just triggered all sorts of things. When I saw that man walking in the Capitol with the Confederate flag that has, again, so it's those things that you're looking at. And I think, but if we're not discussing, that this is wrong, you can't, and I know it's difficult to discuss it when you're a child's parent or aunt or uncle or even a fellow teacher does align with the person or group that you're talking about, but it's the actions that we're talking about. In our lifetime, have any of us seen this? No, we've never seen someone forcibly go into a building that they're not supposed to be in. We've never seen that, and so that's what you're looking at. But I don't know. I'm curious to what my students might say. I teach college students and we're remote this semester, but I know in May, I had many students who would email me, call me, who are really upset about the events in Philadelphia when Philly had the riots. And they would ask me, like, why is this happening? And the one response I gave to them, this is just long overdue. It's something that, we thought could not happen in Philadelphia, but right time, right place, right circumstance, anything is possible. And I think that's the thing we have to think about, is that we're blinded by, I think one of you had talked about the history of events and things that have occurred. This isn't the first time that this has happened, and it certainly won't be the last. And so the thing is, how do we prevent this from, history from repeating itself? What can we do to finally stop this kind of cycle of hate?
I would add as well that it's the first time it has happened in the Congress building in a number of years since the British invaded. But black and brown families have had these invasions happen. You look at Tulsa, you look at many stories of black families, brown families moving into predominantly white neighborhoods and then being chased out of neighborhoods Stories of black drivers driving through the South as recent as the 90s and being stopped for no particular reason.
Right.
You have to connect the dots as to what happened on Wednesday. It
How
happened
did
in
we get
Congress,
here?
right?
Right. How did,
Congress, the seat of democracy, and the world was looking on as this happened. And many countries around the world were also looking on in fear, because if this happens in the US,
can happen anywhere.
Anywhere in the world. But aligning it or juxtaposing it to everyday life. When our students enter buildings and they're stopped, or they're going shopping and they're asked or followed around in buildings, and the trauma that does to one's confidence. And our students were watching Wednesday, knowing that for many of our Black and brown students, they know that if it were them, they would have been shot, they would have been dead.
Right.
They're seeing lighter hued folks committing crimes and selfies being taken. And how does this play out in our classrooms, to the point earlier about diversity within our schools? It's who does the teacher call on? Who does the teacher assume is intelligent? Who gets tougher discipline responses in our classrooms? Which teacher has access to the career advancement and to the training? The frontline staff in our school buildings, what opportunities for advancement and promotion do they have? So all of these things are connected to the implicit bias and the microaggression and the imposter syndrome that our students face. And we have to bring it back to the education, back to the school structures.
Yeah.
Dr. Crosby, you talking about the noose. I had a parent last year ask me, because in 5th grade, I also teach middle as well. And I begin to teach the legacy of lynching using the teaching tolerances, curriculum.
Yeah.
And we started looking at the EJI's Legacy Memorial and Museum. And I had a parent was like, "Oh, why would you do this? Why would you teach about this
because people are still being lynched."
Exactly. He was like, but his point was like, why would you take time out of my child moving to teach about this? And I was like, because it's their history.
Their history.
It's prone. And so I was petty. I had to take the petty. I called the parent up. And I was like, see, I took the petty walk. Yeah. But I had to. I had to say, this is why. Because I can tell you, my students don't know. They unless I'm teaching them about lynching, they have no idea of what it is. And they have to understand that our country uses many systemic ways of oppressing someone. And lynching was one of those things.
Right.
And but I was able to bring it back this year because I was able to use NASCAR and, the whole incident with the noose and why that was such a huge issue as well with Bubba Wallace. So I was like, well, we did bring it back to PE this year, but I think our students need to know.
Because, if we're not teaching them that, I mean, I can't imagine anybody, like if you showed somebody a noose and they're like, oh, okay. I don't know how I would respond to that, because both of my parents were from the South, so I obviously learned that history. And I'm a big fan of reading about, civil rights and justice. And every time I see any kind of noose, I am upset. Like any kind of noose, it just triggers and then so if I see a noose hanging, my first inclination is that is not a nice sign. How are you doing?
No, and I think also we have to recognize that when we do teach it, I used to teach high school English language arts for 16 years before I was a behavioral interventionist and now doing consulting. When I taught lynching in African American literature class or in English 3, American Lit, when I did a unit on lynching, and I would, kids wanted to throw up that day. It was not a feel good day in Miss E's class the day I talked about lynching. And so just being there for them and sitting in it with them and having that compassion that this is their history. It's not my history, but it's our American history. I'm not African American. I'm Arab American, but I still brought that to them because I wanted them to know. And so many of them had no idea in 10th and 11th grade how bad it was.
Yeah.
And so when we did the work, then we give them a place to grieve and to be activists themselves, because that's what we really want. We don't want to be the only ones doing the work. We want to show them how to do the work. So, I used to then launch a creative writing unit where they could do social justice poetry and write about an injustice in their own lives and express it and put their pain on the page. And that's how we can, do a continuum of advocacy. So I move from, seeing the injustice to expressing it, expressing my pain over it. And then, I used to do another thing. I would do it to launch that unit. I'd do a T-chart and ask students, when there's injustice in your world, what are some really productive ways to respond? And what are some ways that are not productive or unproductive? And they would say, well, what do you mean by the difference? And I'm like, well, what do you want when you see injustice? And they're like, we want change. We want justice. Okay, so what are ways that actually lead to that? And what are ways that don't, that impede it? And so we make a T-chart, and then they start to see, oh yeah, well, if I just lash out in anger, if I don't use my words, if they understood there's power in the pen, there's power in peaceful protest. There's power in ways that our democracy, we know we can do these forms of expression to see change. Some students said, one young lady said, I've never been taught that one side of the list that we're all using my words. She'd only been taught acts of aggression in response.
Right.
And so I think we have to embed into our equity work in our classrooms, social emotional. We have to teach our kids about ways that will actually lead to change, because so many of us are so angry that's the only thing we know is how to release our anger. And we don't know how to use our anger and channel it into, argument writing and debate and the power that comes from knowing how to use words.
Yeah, I like how you said channel, because the thing is, our emotions are part of who we are, so we can't deny them, but we have to learn to constructively do something about them. So, like, yeah, if you see a noose, you should be angry, but you just shouldn't turn around and do the same behavior that invoked that noose. You should do something different. I remember, this is kind of off topic, but I just remember when I showed to my students, it's a family partnership course, and I was showing them about poverty in the United States. And I was showing this film, The Depth of Poverty. And they're like, this is happening in the United States? I was like, yeah, this is the stuff that the news does not show on an everyday basis. And they had no idea. They just, they had this one picture of what somebody is who might be in poverty. And they didn't realize that there's layers of poverty. But they've never been exposed to that. They only see the homeless person on the street and come, and we can talk about, can go for days on what people think about someone who's on the street, so.
May I add, Mona, first of all, thank you. Because what you just shared is exactly one of the things I encourage educators to do around decolonizing the curriculum. You will not find in any standards anything that talks about what equates to a genocide. I had the privilege of consulting with Google and the EJI on a whole website they did on the history of lynching. And when you start looking at the numbers and you compare those to other mass genocides, that's exactly what it is. It's a mass genocide. And I think the whole idea around being culturally responsive involves things like whose voices are missing, why are they missing, and then this is where my technology piece comes in. How might we get more access to those voices? There's a reason why the curriculum is absent of, I would say, the background of most of us in varying degrees on this call. And so the first step is to look at, okay, what's standardized? Why is it standardized?
Right.
And how do I decolonize that? And then for those watching, I do want to share a strategy. So, and because this happened last week, actually, before Wednesday, I was on a call with a group of English language arts teachers that their school district basically mandated they have to teach To Kill a Mockingbird. And so, of course, they know how I feel about that. And I said, okay, So here's a way to maneuver within the restrictions that have been forced upon you, teaching a text that is outdated, irrelevant, not culture responsive, and has a high probability of damaging kids. And I say that with 100% degree of certainty because I was one of those kids when I had AP English. So what I said is, as the children read it, what are some of your district policies around what is approved books? And I learned this from another teacher. Her name is Nadia. She teaches in Northern California. So the district policy is if you're teaching a book in your district of which all students are going to read the entire book, it must be approved. But if you take a section out of a book and add that to what you're doing, that doesn't have to be approved. So I said, well, that's when you want to bring in something like The Hate You Give, among other things. But I also said the way I encourage educators to do is, okay, so To Kill a Mockingbird, why don't you change the way you assess the comprehension and understanding of that book and ask the students questions like, why does the character Tom not have agency? How come he doesn't have legal representation? What is the history around black men being falsely accused of assaulting white women? Why were there no black attorneys that existed in the South at that point? Was there some access that they were denied in school or to become an attorney? You see, now that even though you're still reading the book, now it's like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a way that gives my students an opportunity to look at it from a different perspective, that hopefully if you have students that look like me, you can now start to actualize your own agency to start to interrogate things that have been normalized.
That's outstanding, Ken. That's awesome.
Ken, that is so important. You're making me think, you know, what just popped in my head, which you all know is the mirrors and windows and sliding doors, right? It's like, yes, that's such a beautiful concept, mirrors and windows and sliding doors. But, you know, I just have to share with you when you were talking, Dr. Crosby, this seems like, I don't know, a small thing, but this is the things that grow. So I was walking down the hallway the other day in my kindergarten wing. It's the K2 wing of my school. And there's a picture hanging on the wall. And this has to do with experiencing homelessness. You said homeless. And this picture popped in my head. And it said, it was, a kind of a little stick drawing. And it said, help the homeless. Just help the homeless. And of course, like I kind of started, like I get this like all itchy inside and I'm like, oh, not help the homeless, like help people that are experiencing homeless, right?
Right.
Help people that are experiencing homeless. So I almost like, I swear I almost took a pencil and put like a little kid's drawing on the wall. Experience homeless, but like that one just drawing, that kid's narrative of thinking about who people are and what homelessness is already starts with like, there's these other people in the world, in my somewhere, they're not right here, but they're homeless and I need to do things for them, versus knowing obviously there's kids in that hallway who are experiencing homeless and their families are. But it just makes me think how our conversation is so big, but there's these very small steps you need to take, which is children, the way you frame a child's drawing. Right. And that it made me think that teacher didn't change the language of that the child wrote.
Right, because that's the child's reality. I remember when my family was homeless when I was in high school and we were living in a motel room. So we were like that, whatever category of homelessness that is. And it was like, I can't imagine if someone had made me feel homeless. Like I didn't feel homeless living at the Pike Motel. I was just happy to have a roof over my head. But I can't imagine going through those last 2 years or 3 years of high school and the first couple of years of college feeling like I'm homeless. I didn't feel that, thank God. But there's tons of students, whether they're homeless, their parents have a drug addiction, or their parents have a mental health issue, that people just focus on that issue. And it's like, that's who you are. No, that's just a part of me. That's like one of my layers on my cape, one of the strings on my cape. That's it. It's not who you are. It's just a part of who you are. And I think that's, the language is so critical. Like it just,
I think teachers have to be like, many of us have to put our egos aside and instead of being the all-knowing. And I've been very, very blessed. It's amazing. It's amazing when God or whomever you believe in shows you a door and you push through that door, how many amazing things begin to happen. And so I've been able to reach out to our Holocaust Museum here in Houston, and they've come in and I've brought them in they teach so much more than just about the Holocaust. Their basic premises, let's teach about fundamental human rights. And I've been able to go to teachers and say, let's look at your curriculum and how can we support it using outside agencies, whether it's third grade, we bring in the Beacon, which is one of our homelessness agencies, to talk about homelessness and to talk about that it's a state. It's a circumstance. It's not who you are. And bringing in the Holocaust Museum and bringing in different community organizations that help. It may not be exactly what the curriculum is, but it helps to give it more depth. We have looked at what is a genocide and what constitutes a genocide in middle school PE through the Holocaust Museum, looking at Rwanda, Sudan, Cambodia, Bosnia, Argentina, Guatemala, and they've been able to look at through the convention, that the Nuremberg laws and the convention that happened after the Holocaust, what constitutes a genocide, and been able to help them understand more about the world around them. I think oftentimes we get so caught up in, these are my TEKS or these are my state standards I have to teach. And I'm not willing to take an extra week or an extra few days to push that curriculum to embrace all the identities, all the pieces of the puzzle that's sitting in my classroom. We tend to just I've heard teachers say, oh, I don't see race, I don't see gender, I don't see ethnicity or nationality. Many don't know the difference. I just see my students. And I'm like, well, then you don't see your students. You don't see them. I feel really bad. And I don't mean to take up so much time. We had a little girl last year leave our school. She found another school. Her name is Princess Chloe. And she is truly a princess in the country that she's from in Africa. She's truly a princess. And the kids are, giving her a hard time about, you're not really a princess. And yes, she is. She truly is this. But because she did not fit the stereotype that the students had on what a princess should look like, that they didn't understand that, why could a princess be so dark? And is there really such things as princesses and princesses anymore? They only see what they see in Pixar and Disney. Yeah. And she left and didn't come back. And I have to now it made me take a step back and look at, where am I dropping the ball? What did I not do in helping that classroom or helping her feel more included in PE? But I think that we've got to push and drop those egos down and say, and I don't know everything about this. Let me bring in somebody else to help, even if it's a parent.
Yeah, I think it even goes to maybe even a little bit more deeply than, talking about ego. I feel like one of the things that comes up a lot when I am, talking in teams and with teams of folks at work is talking about not necessarily dropping our egos, but considering other people's values. It's more, I find that a lot of the times we have to think outside of our own personal values when we're talking about our students and what their experience at home is. And that's just something that I find, especially of late, that I am interrupting about quite a bit when we're having team meetings, when we're making decisions about students and their educational path and talking about how we're going to support their families. I think it can be a really difficult thing to do. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm trying to focus my advocacy work on, is how to support teachers in doing that. Because when we are able to kind of set aside our own personal values, I think we're going to be able to better help and support the students that are not kind of aligning with the same values that we hold. And knowing that our educational systems are mostly they're based upon white middle class or middle to upper class values, the students that don't fit into that system are the ones that are kind of lagging behind, or the ones that we aren't supporting as efficiently as we can and as greatly as we can. And so I think that that's really, in this work for me personally, I think that that's one of the most difficult challenges that I have when I'm talking with teachers, because they get so stuck on, or not even with teachers, but with educators, all the different educators in the building, they get so stuck. But they really should have this and they really should have that, and they shouldn't be doing this or that, or they need to think that this is important, or they want the students to feel or to recognize that something is important that they feel is important. And sometimes it just doesn't align that way. I don't know if other people have experienced that. I'm sure that you have, but that just comes to mind with, when it comes to a lot of different things, when it comes to what happened on Wednesday, when it comes to the polarizing in our country, when it comes to COVID and all of the restrictions that we have, when it comes to the pandemic and the, what's happening in the medical field when everybody's getting the vaccines right now. I think that that's something that we're going to that we need to continue to focus on, is how we can get educators to set aside their values to talk with students and to figure out how to best support them and their families.
Yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because if you all start to really, in many of the conversations I have with many of my friends, first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to listen and absorb and learn with you all, because this is why I love being able, Sheldon, I appreciate y'all having me on here. I really do. Look at how much. So let me provide a real big overarching view here. So the whole idea around values and what's valued. Okay, so first of all, education is designed to perpetuate capitalism and a myth of meritocracy. Think about what's most valued in schools. Your time, that equates to productivity. It's one of the things I always ask educators is, if I'm a student in your class and I finish my work and there's still half the class left, what do I get to do? And unfortunately, more often than not, it's, well, I'll just give you some extra work. And I'm like, but see, you're equating my learning to the amount of time, not the actual product. Okay, so you don't reward productivity, you reward time. Think about why our school schedules generally are 8 to 3. You have to sign in and sign out, and everything is neatly organized and compartmentalized. Adding to that is, if you start to interrogate really the messaging and the language within schools, and something I bring up in all my talks, is the whole idea, if you were to do an inventory of the language that is predominantly used in schools and really start looking at the language in schools in economically exploited and impoverished zip codes versus wealthy zip codes, you will see a pattern of deficit-based language. And you will also see how the rewarding of mediocrity is bastardized into that deficit-based language around terminology that you all probably heard, like a growth mindset, grit, resilience. The whole idea is that, if you're mediocre, you can be good. You just got to show more grit. But then they apply that to the individuals at many of our under-resourced and over-exploited schools or school districts to say, okay, well, you don't need more money. You just got to show more resilience and more grit. And then what happens is, think about it, and you all have touched on the social and emotional learning component. What I always tell people is, one, you are terrorizing and damaging kids for two reasons. One, if you get constant negative messaging, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12 years, what does that do to us and our ability to understand what we value and what our value is that we bring to our learning environment? If I am constantly told that I am less than, I need intervention, you're performing below grade level, and then think about how much that fits neatly into standardized testing, which sadly a lot of educators don't know. Standardized testing is rooted in eugenics. So you see, that's another subversive way of saying your value is less than your cisgender, upper middle class, white male counterparts. And so therefore you must work harder. There's a productivity aspect by putting in more time to be equal to them. And once I started to realize that, and I'll share this quick snippet. Earlier in my career, I did that. I think it's important for me to share. I didn't get it right. I did that with my students. I said, if you finish work early, I'm going to give you more. And I remember one student who I'm still in touch with now, and he's an adult. He was like, Mr. Sheldon, why do I have to do extra work? I want to get the camera and go do some photography stuff. And I was like, that's a good question. I don't know why you have to do extra work, because that had been normalized for me. And I would tell my students, if you finish early, you're good. You can do something creative. We can think of it. What's something else we might be able to do together as a class that will augment what we're already learning? And I will say that what that did was totally change the culture of my learning environment, where all of the children knew that they were valued more so than their time, and that whatever equated to a representation of your knowledge and understanding of what we were studying, it doesn't matter whether you finish it in 1 day or 5 days. The whole point is I need you to finish, and I'm going to support you in that process, period.
Well, I tell you, this conversation could go on and on and on. And Sheldon, if this is representative of what the next 3 days are going to be and what you have jam-packed and put together, then I don't even know how we're going to even be able to handle it all. So I want you to tell us a little bit about these next 3 days, because I know that you have them theme centered by each day. So if you'll tell our viewing audience a little bit about that. And then for the viewers that are in, I think that you also have a nice treat. I think there's some all access passes that you're giving away as well. So please jump in and tell us what we should anticipate over the next 3 days.
This is just a taste. This is just a taste. First of all, I gotta thank the guests for showing up today. Some of y'all hit up last minute. And I reached out to some good folks that I knew are about this work. And so again, thank you so much for this panel. I just been soaking it all up and just really enjoying this. So what we'll do is, starting tomorrow at 7 a.m. Eastern time. So these are pre-recorded videos. So from 7 a.m. Eastern time, starting tomorrow, you will have access to all the videos that are available centered around the power of preparation. And then the next day, Tuesday, same process. You'll get the videos, access to the videos for the power of persuasion. And then on Wednesday, the same thing. You'll get access to the videos for the power of persistence. So they're available for free for 24 hours. It's just like if you went to a live summit, because people will say, well, why is this happening during a school day? And it's like, if you went to a conference, you would only get to choose 1 or 2 sessions at a time. You can't go to multiple sessions at the same time. So you would have a selection of 5, 10, but this time you're like have a selection of like 20 or 30 sessions to go to throughout the day. And they're available for 24 hours. So really excited about this opportunity. And this is just a small portion of the type of content that you'll be able to get throughout the next 3 days. So I want to give an opportunity. I'm sorry, question?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. I wanted to give out a few free passes for the All Access Pass. All Access Pass allows you to keep the content. So again, they're available for 24 hours, but if you're looking to keep the content, and let's say money is tight, it's $69 to purchase All Access Pass, but today we're going to give away 3 free ones today. What I'm looking for is just the first 3 people that can share a little bit about what they learned today in today's session, our live session. The first 3 people that can send me something that they've learned via the comments, we'll get you set up with some all access passes.
All right. You just want them to drop that in the comments, tweet it out. You want them to use the hashtag.
I love you for that. See, I'm social media, not my jams. So yes,
get that
how about a
hashtag in there.
Yeah, let's throw a hashtag.
Hashtag Leading Equity Summit.
Yes, hashtag Leading Equity Summit. Put down something that you picked up from today. Hashtag Leading Equity Summit.
All right. So those first 3 people that get that done, and then we'll contact those individuals directly to let you know that you've won that. And then tonight's not the only night, but tune in the rest of this week, because every night, day 1, day 2, day 3. So day 1 was the planning no, the preparation. Day 2 is the persistence, and day 3 is persuasion. Pass the Scope EDU is going to do a recap every night, same time as tonight, of those speakers and sessions from that day. So please continue to follow us. We love you guys for being here, tuning in. To our panelists tonight, you guys really did the thing tonight, and just getting us. This truly was a lead up party. So if you did not register for the summit yet,
but hold up,
register.
Folks are already trying to get those 3-day.
Yeah, I'm watching
those
it already.
pass.
Emma, I see
Right
Emma
now.
already in there.
Let's make sure those educators also know how to follow the directions. If they did not use the hashtag, then they're gonna have to try again. We gotta model what we say now.
Hold on. To be fair, though, he did say if you want to drop a comment.
I did
as
say
well.
that.
Yep, he did say.
Emma, I'm hooking Emma up. She held it down. She put the hashtag in there and everything. And she gave me her email. So I'm gonna hook you up, Emma.
Look, Emma's like, just go ahead and email me my pass. I'm not fooling around with y'all. No. But definitely, guys, register for the summit. Please be sure to register so you don't miss out on this learning. As Sheldon mentioned, you've got 24 hours, and we know that 24 hours is simply not even enough time to watch all the sessions. So you certainly want to make sure that you invest in those passes if you don't win one as well, to get this learning year round. Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Are we going to sign out for the night?
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize what time it was. Y'all crushed it. Oh my goodness, I'm sitting here trying to produce the show, but writing notes down and all this stuff because, I got some teachers to talk to. I'm no longer in the classroom. I'm on the dark side of ed tech right now, what I do in education, as I like to say. But I've been challenging schools and districts in my conversations on a daily basis. And the fruit that you provided today is really going to allow me to plant some seeds so we can all reap the harvest in the end for change. So we want to thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to have to do this again because I got chills. I'm on fire. I got all kind of stuff going on in my body. Once again, those that are listening, like Valerie said, we'll be with you each evening to do it after the bell. This was the before the bell session. We're going to do an after the bell session because we know some people are not able to watch the videos when they're first released in the morning, but you get a chance to check out some of the videos while they are free. Please do so and join in on the conversations that we'll be having once again at 6:30 to 8 Eastern Standard Time. Let me get my geography right there. Eastern Standard Time, on that. And we'll be sure to have some more fire that's coming out from this conference. Any parting shouts from you wonderful people here?
Thank you, Sheldon.
Thank you, Sheldon.
Great work with the Leading Equity Center. Looking forward
Thank
to
you, Sheldon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This will be on. We're gonna pop this on the podcast. We're gonna publish that tomorrow. So this conversation we'll just publish each night. So again, thank you to Valerie for reminding me. Put hashtag Leading Equity Summit. Put a comment in there, and you can hit me on social media. Twitter is probably the best one right now, and I will get you the first 3. I already got 1, so I got 2 more left. Can get a pass for all access pass.
Yeah, follow the rules, like Valerie said. She's a principal. Follow the rules. All right, and for Pass the Scope EDU, we thank you for allowing us to be able to amplify your voice and your story as we continue to try to ignite a passion for learning one scope at a time. We'll holler at y'all later.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Go Advocate.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.